So I'm gonna give you guys a great strategy to buy your first rental property with very little down payment. The number one reason why people don't start investing in rental properties is because of the initial down payment requirement. Most people think you need 20 to 25% down to buy a rental property, and that's just not true. Today, I'm gonna give you one strategy that I've used personally, and I know so many people have used this exact same strategy to acquire their first rental property with just 5% down. So most of the time when you're starting your real estate investing, the first property that you invest in is your primary residence. When you buy your first home, you could put as little as 3% down, and there's many programs available with very little down payment requirement. So when you're buying your first property, most of the time this is not your dream home. This is just the first property that you could afford and get into. Normally, people stay in their first home for a certain number of years, and then they upgrade to a nicer, bigger home. The way that people normally do this is they sell their first home, take that equity that they built up, and they invest it into the next property. This is a great strategy, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But for me personally, every single property that I sold over the last decade, because I needed to take that money and put it into the next deal, I wish I could have kept that property. The reason why is the more property you accumulate, the more exposure you have to long-term real estate appreciation, and the wealthier you're gonna get. One of the best things about real estate is you don't necessarily need to sell a property in order to get some of the money out of that property. So let's just say that the first property you bought is your primary home, you made some improvements to it, plus the property appreciated over the last 5 to 7 years, and now it's gone from 200,000 to 300,000 or 400,000. You can do a cash out refinance or a home equity line of credit to take some of that equity out without selling the property. When you take money out of a property, this is a debt that you've incurred. There's no tax liability to do so. So this is one of the ways that super wealthy real estate investors don't pay any taxes, because what they do is they have a portfolio of properties. When the properties have appreciated quite a bit, they do a cash out refinance or take an equity line of credit on those properties that have appreciated and take some of the equity out. That gives them free cash flow and doesn't require any tax liability on the money that they've taken out. So back to the plan. Now you've got that first primary residence property and you want to buy your first rental property. The best way to do this is to simply turn your current home into a rental property and then buy the next property to be your primary home. When you're buying your next primary residence, you can do as little as 5% down. And on the current home, you can turn that into a rental. This is perfectly legal, and many people do this to acquire their first rental property. When you're converting your current primary home into a rental property, most of the time the bank will allow you to use incoming rental income on that property to qualify. What this means is you can show a lease of somebody who's going to be renting the property, and they'll allow you to use that as income. That lease payment is going to offset your monthly mortgage payment on the current home. That allows you to buy a new property without having the current mortgage payment count against your debt to income ratio. Now, if I lost you, here's what I meant. The current property that you're in, you rent it out to a tenant. That tenant is gonna pay you monthly rent. The total monthly rent should meet or exceed the current mortgage payment. If it does, then this really has no negative impact on your debt ratios. The debt ratio is basically how much debt you have per month versus how much income you make. So if your debts aren't really going up, then it's a neutral effect on your debt ratio. So now you can buy your new primary home and turn your current home into a rental property. And you could do this over and over again if you'd like, or if you buy that next property and you want to stay there for a long period of time, you don't really want to turn it into a rental again, then what you could do is just access the equity in either property 1 or property 2 and use some of that equity to put down a large down payment on your next rental property. This is a great way to get started with rental property investing, and like I said, it's a common way that many people get into it without having to put a ton of money down. If you have any questions on this strategy, feel free to reach out to me, leave a comment below, and I can do another video on this topic, or shoot me a message and I can give you more detailed information. So until next time, I'll see you guys on the next video.